Plugin of the week is the Acustica Audio Pink. This is a recent release. If you're familiar with Acustica Audio, a company based in Italy, they've been doing some plugin technology for a while that involves sort of impulse response technology or some variation thereof. And this is a more recent release, and this involves their new Core 8 technology, which uses multi-threading features, which allows it to actually operate a little bit more efficiently, or quite a bit more efficiently than some of the other plugins. So this is part of their Aqua collection. It's a very interesting company. When you open up the manual, you get all kinds of things like, interesting parts of our solar system, like names of moons and things about Venus and the sort. But aside from that, it's actually kind of an interesting idea, concept. And while many people have recommended the Acustica Audio and some people live or die by it and they think it's the greatest thing ever, I wanted to check it out. And so this is my first dive into this. So if I quote or talk about something or some aspect or history of the company, I'll try to keep that to a minimum because I'm not really that familiar with it. And so we're going to kind of work our way through it. But the Pink plugin is an emulation of the 550 API 550A and 550B EQs, as well as an API compressor. And so part of this can be uncovered because, as with many plugin emulations, and if you're seeing the screen kind of glittering here, or the plugin window kind of glittering, this was not happening here, and this may be part of the video transmission. So I did not notice this in using the plugin outside of it. So if that's one of your comments, I don't think it's an issue with the plugin necessarily. It may just be part of the transmission of the class that's kind of causing this, that's making it freak out a little bit. But essentially what it brings in is an FIR technology. So now what I believe that means is a finite impulse response. And which is sort of different from loading in impulse responses, which can kind of slow down the system. So this allows it to be more of a gooey mass of impulse response, of API-ishness, and therefore it can be accessed and kind of loaded more quickly. So I'm not going to get too much into the aspects of that and how much quicker it is. I would expect, given their what they've talked about here, is that it's much more responsive. What I will talk about is basically how the plugin operates. So when you're working with the EQ, essentially you have an API 550A. Now what's interesting here is the 550A, if you're familiar, is a 3-band EQ, not a 4-band EQ. And so what you get instead, you have your high frequency band, which can be a shelving or a peak EQ. And you can turn the individual band on and off. You could see that it lights up when that's the case. You can select your frequency. So those are the frequencies that are part of the 550A. What they did was they duplicated the mid band. So on the original 550A, you only get one mid band with 400, 800, 1.5, 3K, and 5K. And so you could do as you normally do. It'll step between those positions as you go through the different frequencies. And then you get the boosts. Now, what's interesting is that they give you increments in between the 2 dB boosts. So with the API, if you're familiar, you get stepped positions with it of 2 dB. And sometimes that can be frustrating because as you're working with the EQ, you may want something in between. And then you kind of fudge it and kind of make it all work in the end, adjust the gain, the overall gain a little bit, and you could kind of make, get it to go, give you basically what you want. And they sound so freaking good that it ends up being worthwhile. A big part of that sound is the 2520 op amps, which are in all the API gear, pretty much all the API gear, and they've emulated that here. So I'll kind of get into some of that here in a minute. If you want to use the API B, 550B, then by opening that up, instead of having the duplicated mid-bands, you get the low-mid frequency band and the high-mid frequency band. And then you get the high-frequency selection for the EQs and low-frequency selection for the EQs. So when you select between the two, you can kind of get one or the other, and then you can kind of select your way through it, and the options show up accordingly of what you have available. So you also have shelving on the low end. Now, what's interesting is that on the 550A, and now this is a demo version, so there are two buttons that are missing in the center here, and one is a button that is called BND, band, and that's the band pass. On the API 550A, there's a band pass which filters off below 50 hertz and above 15 kilohertz. Those are minus 3 dB points. And so that would be the 6 dB per octave, I believe that's 6 dB per octave, high pass, low pass filter, but they kind of work together. So it's a single switch that you flip on the original unit, and then it would give you both. So it's not like you get separate high pass, low pass filters, it's just a switch. And it was only on the 550A, not on the 550B. So that button may exist on the full version or an update. I'm not sure about that. When you actually get to the technology, aside from the normal equalization stuff, and we'll do a little demo of it, you have an input trim. Now, when you move the input trim, you get a slight delay, a very short delay as it loads in the settings for the different gain structure, because what that does is it changes the distortion characteristics of it. And in fact, you can actually overdrive the preamp to get coloration. So if you turn it off, you get no preamp coloration. If you put it on, then when this is enabled, you get with the pre a colored sound. So I believe what this is the amplification circuitry of the preamp, and so you get that emulated of the EQ. So the amp of the EQ, and then the amplification circuit of the compression. So I believe that's what it is, and although they don't say it, there's no other reason to put EQ and comp there. And then there is one other selection which is called new, which is also not on this demo version, which is for a new colored preamp. So I'm not sure if that's like a modern, and I'm not sure exactly if this is the op amp, the 2520 op amp that is being emulated here, and then with the different distortion characteristics of driving it. Either way, when you select that preamp coloration, we'll play around a little bit with that. You also have an output control to kind of make up for that. So as you're adding this, it's not necessarily, you're driving the circuit, and then there's a makeup gain that's sort of built in. You also have a compressor here, standard stuff, threshold, makeup gain, which I promise you will not open up at plus 12. Attack and release. These are the identical attack release settings almost that you get on the 2500, the API 2500. And it also has the 3 knee selections, which is soft, medium, hard. There is also an API channel compressor, which I believe is the 225 or the 255. I think it's 225, and but it is different than that because that does not have a the attack setting comes on a switch that's fast, medium, slow. And I don't believe there's knee settings. That's the only the 2500 you get there. Also with the 2500, you get the ability to go to a feedback or feed forward style compression. And where that works and what that's really cool for, the feed forward style compression is a more modern VCA compressor style where the input signal drives the compression. The feedback style takes the output of the VCA and feeds it back into the sidechain circuit so that you get a little bit more of a smoother type of a compression, whereas with the feed forward, you get something that's a little bit more reactive. And in addition to all of these settings, which you normally find, there's also a button here called Pink. Now, aside from giving you a symbol here, which I guess harkens back a little bit to Prince. I didn't think about that, but last week, as of the shooting of this video, Prince passed away, and so this just happens to be a little artifact of that by accident completely. And all the symbol was very different from this, but I think he used like all of these types of symbols in his music and stuff. But this is actually a high pass filter for the compression circuits, for the sidechain circuit, so it's not in the audio signal. And the Insane feature just eats up more CPU cycles, but what it does is it also makes the compression circuitry more accurate and responsive. So those are the basic parameters. So let's start out with a little bit of compression since we're here. And maybe I'll just start with some drums. I'm not going to do too long of a demo. One of my favorite VCA settings would be to go to fast attack or slow attack, fast release. We'll just kind of keep it up there. And then so this is go back to the beginning here. So this is a feed forward style. So you can hear how that's a little smoother. This is with a hard setting. So you can hear how the feed forward's a little bit punchier, and that's true to the original. Now the soft setting gives you a little bit more gain reduction than I would expect. So this is the knee is the aggressiveness of the way that the ratio was applied. Sometimes in these types of settings, different types of compressors, there will be a knee, a built-in knee that happens in the ratio. When you change the ratio, it'll shift the point in the knee where things are, where it actually starts to apply the ratio. So how aggressively or how quickly does it apply the ratio? That's the difference between a soft, medium, and hard knee. So if you have a soft knee, rather than it being instantaneously 4:1, it'll kind of blend in a little bit and ramp up to that 4:1. Think of it like as a crossfade control for your ratio, essentially. Whereas you go to hard knee, it's coming in more instantaneously. And with analog circuitry, it's usually never perfectly instantaneous. It's easier to write that into code, into a plugin in a digital. But overall, this actually sounds good. A little bit of inconsistency, and that could have been in the audio there between the threshold with the soft, medium, and hard. But otherwise, the characteristics of the feed forward and feedback and all of that are true to what an API 2500 would be. Let's bypass this in and out. And that captures a lot of the 2500 in terms of it's, as a VCA compressor, it's fairly clean. So given all the characteristics, and I don't know for sure, I don't have, it's obviously it's not documented. That's what I'm feeling that this is, just given the settings and the parameters that are made available to you, because it matches up pretty well to what that does. On this end, it's obviously API stuff. So let's get into a little bit of an EQ thing and just kind of see. Let's start with the 550A. Now, one of the primary differences between the 550A and 550B is the proportional Q. So if you're on the A circuitry, and also what I notice in the manual, and this is a button that's missing here too, is there is a proportional Q button. And but I believe if my memory serves me correctly, the API 550 is not a proportional Q. It is a constant Q. And what that means is that when you boost or cut, the bandwidth essentially stays the same when you boost or cut, regardless of how much you boost or cut by. Whereas the proportional Q, what happens as you boost or cut, the more you boost or cut, the narrower the bandwidth becomes. And so that would be something that would occur in the B setting, and this would give you more of the proportional Q. Now, that in what I saw in the manual, there is an extra button, so I'm not sure if that's not in the demo version that I have loaded here, and that's a very distinct possibility. But when you see that extra switch, I believe it gives you the ability to switch between proportional and constant Q, and then that would give you that option to switch. And I believe that would give you the option to switch whether you're on the A or on the B. So that would give you a characteristic that is not in the original. So often with these types of emulations, there are things that you may have always wanted, engineers have always wanted, but it just never ended up kind of in the final, in the final mix of things. But in the plugin, you could kind of make it what you want. So you could technically put all the frequencies in between and sort of fake your way through it. So let's do a little 10K shelf here by a couple dB. And So you can see the band is active because it lights up. And then let's throw a little thump down here on the bottom. So what I'll do is just kind of bring that down to 50 cycles. And here's a classic example of where it's too much. So I'll go back to a dB. Now this is compression and EQ. Now I didn't find any documentation about making this, whether the compressor is always post EQ or pre EQ. I'll kind of keep an eye on that, so I'm not clear about that. But if I wanted to kind of pick up on this, I could do something like a little dip here. And having the extra band in here is kind of cool because it allows me to kind of give an edge here to something, you know. So for example, I could do a little boost here at little snap there at 5K. And let's try to balance this off in the output stage. So it's got a lot of punchiness. I would say it seems more reactive than I would expect. I'm not sure if there's another setting here and that doubles the amount. I saw something in the documentation that talked about 24 dB of gain on that. I'm not sure if that was a typo or whether there is some other way of accessing this, but given the small amounts, it seems a little bit more aggressive than what I expected, but it basically works. Let's actually we'll take a little cruise over here to the preamps because I did want to go over that. I was going to start with that. I guess that does drive the compression more. So let me turn off the compression. So this allows me to sort of drive the preamp here without necessarily affecting the gain. So the pre is meant to have a colored sound. The EQ is meant to be more of a clean, transparent sound. Let's see what that sounds like. And then there is the comp setting, which is meant to be linear. There are definitely some distinct tonal colorations. Now, one thing I'm not clear about as well is if this amplification stage is actually driving just the overall electronics or the preamp selections. I would expect the preamp selections. Sounds like the preamp selections. Because that's sounding the same, so that's definitely running in the preamp selection. So I can kind of work it from there. But it also does affect the compression, which is a little bit odd. I would think that should be a little bit separated. So as if I drive this up on the preamp stage, should I be driving up the gain there? Then I'm not so sure. All right, so let's switch over to the 550B. Now, when I switch here, what ends up happening is I get different frequencies. So instead of 50 on the low end, I get 30, 40, and 50. So this gives me the ability to kind of drive in lower frequencies. So maybe I want to drop this down to 40 here. Instead, on this end, I could, go with a shelf. And then, or I'll just kind of leave that as it is. And then here, this kind of gets me a little bit more to the territory I was going for. Either 180 or 240 is like a little bit of a low-mid dip. And then here, this extends the high frequencies there. So if I was going back to the 5K, I could do this, but it gives me the ability to kind of parametrically kind of dive up a lot more. So one of the transitions of the 550A to the 550B was not just that you had an extra band, but each band had more frequency selections. So if my memory serves me right, you had about like 5 frequency selections on the 550A and 7 on the 550B. And it is a different sound because of the proportional cue. That's like one of the... This also goes up to 15K. So you kind of can really boost that air up top. So that's really like true to the original. You can hear with that boost, how that cue gets really, gets very narrow and kind of focuses in and gets very pointed, and that's very much true to the way that the API proportional cue works. So if you're not familiar with that, essentially the more you boost, the narrower the cue gets. The less you boost, the wider the band gets. And now I can't A/B back and forth between my settings between the two sides. It sort of picks up. And it does have a lot of the character of the API kind of built into it. It's kind of an interesting concept and idea. Now, I haven't taken this through a whole multi-track mix to see how efficient. It's not easy to necessarily judge. It's not slowing down my mix at all. The only thing I'm seeing here is some glitching with the graphics, which was not happening before, but I'm also doing the video capture and also a live video transmission, so that may be eating up on the graphic CPU power. I was not getting this glitching in normal usage. I've not run it through the paces of a full multi-track, so I don't know how it suffocates a session in terms of processing power or how much more efficient that it's made it. But it's an interesting concept and a different approach to emulation technology than what a lot of the current manufacturers are doing, and worth demoing on checking it out and maybe doing a little bit of a side-by-side comparison against some of the other API components. But this is a plugin of the week, an interesting one. Acustica Audio, a company based out of Italy, using impulse response technology. They've been around for years, so this is not something new, but this Core 8 technology is the new aspect of it. Name of the plugin is Pink. It's part of their Aqua collection, the first one to use their Core 8 technology. Preamp, it's meant to be a whole chain here. So this is sort of like your mini API 500 rack with actual API components built into it, and pretty cool. That's our plugin of the week, Acustica Audio, Pink.